All right, Revelation chapter 7. Revelation 7, let's see. Talked about this Wednesday night, but we'll go over some of it again and have a few other things to say about it. Now in Revelation chapter 7, we're in kind of a parenthesis, and chapter 6 was the first time through the tribulation period, and it goes through 7 seals, actually only gets through 6 of them, and the 7th one isn't opened yet. It's when he opens the 7th one that, boom, the next account of the tribulation period occurs. And so Revelation 7 is a parenthesis. It's an intermission. And he tells us about what's getting ready to happen as the tribulation period is about ready to start. And he says, all right, now there is all kinds of trouble coming on this earth, but I don't even want the wind to blow until I'm sure that my people are sealed. And so it tells about the 144,000 Jews that are down here on the earth that will be preaching during this time. And he's getting them all sealed up. And then in verses 9 and down, he talks about an innumerable number of people up in heaven. And they were redeemed to God out of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues, stood before the Lamb. And singing praises unto the Lord. All right, so with that setting in mind, let's pick up the reading. Let's see, I guess verse 13. And one of the elders answered, saying unto me, what are these which are arrayed in white robes, and whence came they? Sometimes God asks a question to see if you know, not because he doesn't know, of course. Verse 14, and I said unto him, Sir, thou knowest, which is a kind of a nice way of saying, why don't you tell me? And he said to me, These are they which came out of great tribulation, and have washed their robes, and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. And as we pointed out, I think last time when we did talk about it, yeah, the robes are still white in the blood of the Lamb, but they did the washing. And one of the things that will blow your mind as you study the Pauline epistles in the book of Revelation is you'll see there is some differences. Just like there's some differences in the book of Matthew when he was dealing with the Jews bringing in that kingdom. And in the Pauline epistles when he's dealing with the church, mostly Gentile. Guess what? In the book of Revelation, the church is gone. It's raptured out of here. And you're back to a Jewish setup, and there are works involved that were not in the Pauline epistles. And of course, some of my fundamentalist friends get mad at me, and I love them all very dearly. But I take my Bible literally for what it says. If it says works, it means works. And if it says no works, it means no works. And if it says he washed you, he washed you. And if it says you washed you, then you washed you. Amen. I just go word for word what it actually says. Now, they did wash in the blood of Christ, but they washed in the blood of Christ. There's an element of works with them that wasn't in. In chapter 1, it says he washed them in the blood of Christ. In chapter 7, it's different, and we're going to look at a whole bunch of other verses that say that before we get through our study here in the tribulation period. This ain't one place. It's over and over again. You can't deny it once you see all the verses that show the element of works in the tribulation period. You just can't miss it. Verse 15, Therefore are they before the throne of God, and serve him day and night in his temple, and he that sitteth on the throne shall dwell among them. And that's a wonderful thing, that after tribulation, they get to be up there with God, and God dwells among them. Now, I don't know what you're dreaming of and what you hope to attain. If you're wanting a big mansion or some nice cars or these little electronic gadgets everybody's so excited about these days, or your favorite team to win the championship or what. But there is not a better thing than you and God dwelling together. Amen. That is the top best thing that could ever happen to you. And it shows you where we are in that Christians don't ever talk about that anymore. That ought to be number one. If you've got God, you've got everything you need. And if you don't have God, I couldn't care less what you have. You are going to have a big empty spot in your heart that will never be satisfied or filled. But these people came out of tribulation, and they get to dwell with God. Verse 16, They shall hunger no more. Uh-oh. Obviously implying they've been starving. Because remember, if they didn't take that mark of the beast, which damns you, they couldn't buy or sell. They shall hunger no more, neither thirst anymore. Okay, well that doesn't make any sense unless they've been real thirsty. You know why? They've been running out in the desert hiding from persecution. That's why. And our Baptist forefathers are real familiar with all this stuff. They know all about it. We have some of this stuff as we read and believe it and preach it and teach it now. You know, people are just, oh, what? Oh, they're having a hard time. That has been the norm in much of church history. We are spoiled kids. We were joking around this afternoon about how the baby of the family is spoiled, and we were only half joking. Let me tell you something. We, in this last days before the Lord comes back, we're the baby of the family. We are spoiled. I mean, there is no group of Bible-believing Baptists before us that had it nearly like we do. And somehow they got a lot more work doing with all that hardship and persecution. But they shall, back to verse 16, they shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more, neither shall the sun light on them, nor any heat. Well, why would it say that? Unless they've been out in the sun without any shelter. There's no other reason to say that. If they ain't never had any sun on them anyway, why would you say, and they're still not going to have any sun? That doesn't really make much sense. Obviously, they've been in terrible, terrible straits. Look at Isaiah chapter 49. Isaiah 49:10, they shall not hunger nor thirst, neither shall the heat nor sun smite them. For he that hath mercy on them shall lead them, even by the springs of water shall he guide them. So the Lord, there's something goes on there where the Lord shows up with his people in the wilderness during the tribulation period and restores them and takes care of them. And the ones that don't, and believe me, there are plenty that do not survive the tribulation, they get up there to heaven where they don't have to worry about these things anymore. Notice how tender God's care is for his people, even though he suffers long with them sometimes and lets them suffer long. Boy, I hate to say that. Verse 17, for the Lamb which is in back in Revelation chapter 7. I'm running so many references here. I hope I don't lose people. Back in Revelation 7, verse 17, for the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne shall feed them, and shall lead them unto living fountains of waters, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. Now, the idea is, it is unbelievable what they've been through. And some of you have seen historical documentaries on the Holocaust and the horrible things that the Jews went through in World War II, and it's just so upsetting. It's just almost too upsetting to even watch. And God knows they're going to go through something similar all over again, and probably quite a bit worse in the tribulation period. Let me tell you what that tells you practically. Don't reject the Lord. Amen. If you reject the Lord, it is horrible what happens to you. And the Jews are the great lesson from history in doing that. And our heart goes out to them. I know they're enemies for the gospel's sake, but they're beloved for the Father's sake. And we have a weird relationship with them because of the way they've rejected the Lord. We can't be on their side, but good night, we pity them for the things they've been through, and then have to, if we're going to preach the truth of the Word of God, we're going to have to say they're going to go through it again. Here's another comforting psalm speaking of these things. Psalm 121, verse 5. The Lord is thy keeper, the Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. If they're going to make it, it'll be only because the Lord shows up. All right, back to Revelation chapter 7. Now that last verse said, the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne shall feed them, and shall lead them unto living fountains of waters, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. The Lord is saying, now, you're going through hardship. Dr. Ruckman used to preach us a sermon called, This Life is a Vale of Tears. And it is, and it's horrible. And there's heartbreak, and all you got to do is hang around a little while, and your heart will be broken too. And if it hadn't yet, you just hang around. And some of us have it better than most, don't get me wrong. But it will happen. And the Lord sees that, and the Lord feels every bit of that. We sometimes get thinking that God's up there and doesn't care. And the truth is, He does. And it's a big deal to Him to see our tears. And He takes note of our tears and talks about put their tears in a bottle. And talks here about wiping away all tears. And if that's not enough, look at where He says it again in Revelation chapter 21 and verse 4. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. God says, all right, I got to deal with some things. I got to deal with some sin issues, and I'm going to get rid of these things when I can. And that's something He notices. So it said one time up in heaven after the tribulation period, taking tears from the persecuted tribulation saints. And then it's said again, tears from the reprimanded church age saints. And then another time in heaven after the millennium, taking in the tears from the heartbroken loved ones of condemned sinners at the great white throne judgment. Now, although it's true we have the mind of Christ, let me tell you about the mind of Christ. It wept. The mind of Christ led Him to weep at Lazarus' tomb. The mind of Christ led Him to weep over Jerusalem. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that stonest the prophets and killest them that are sent unto thee, how often would I have gathered you as a hen doth her chicks under her wings, but ye would not. And many a mother has said that about their children, and many a father has said that about his children, and many a preacher has said that about the congregation and the community he is trying to preach in. And it's just a shame. People see this world and the flesh and the devil and everything it's offering, and they just choose to take it. It's a heartbreak. Don't you know the prodigal's father heart was broken when he saw his son going into the far country, getting a bunch of mess and a bunch of difficulties that he knew there was no reason for him to get into. All right, Revelation chapter 8. Revelation chapter 8 and verse 1. And when he had opened the seventh seal, so finally we get that seventh seal in chapter 6. Of course, we had the previous ones. Now finally the seventh seal opens. And when he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. And that is a false rumor that there are no women in heaven based on this verse, that there was silence for half an hour. That is not true, I assure you. All right, but something does happen. The silence probably represents a break, a rest. Dad was teaching in Sunday school this morning about the rest. He was also I've got to say this. He was teaching about the nuts, and all the protein and everything, and that's how come squirrels can get fat eating those nuts. And that brought to mind one of my all-time favorite jokes, one of my all-time favorite riddles. What's the best way to catch a squirrel? Climb up in a tree and act like a nut. I love that one. But anyway, Dad was teaching about the rests this morning. And that doesn't mean that you actually lay down and rest. It means you just stop for a minute. And a lot of times when there's a break in things, you just stop for a minute. And so maybe that's what's going on here with this silence in heaven for half an hour. Verse 2, and I saw the seven angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. So having completed the tribulation account now that had 7 seals being opened on the book, now we've got 7 angels getting ready to blow 7 trumpets. Verse 3. And another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer. And there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all saints upon the golden altar, which was before the throne. So this is the temple that's up in heaven. Now there's a temple down on earth rebuilt during this tribulation period. We've discussed that a little bit, and we'll discuss it a whole lot more in one of the other accounts of the tribulation. But remember that the temple and the temple furniture and all that stuff was based on what's up in heaven. And Moses got to see what was up there, and everything that they built down here was based on what's up there. So there's a temple up in heaven too. And there's a golden altar. And the incense altar that was down here on earth represents that golden altar up in heaven. And the thing that comes on it is worship, prayers. It was the brass one that was used to offer the sacrifices for the atonement of sins. But the golden incense altar that has the cherubim forming the mercy seat, in front of it, behind it or in front. I'm not sure how you word that, which one's in front. I guess it would be in front of the thing. That's the one that's in heaven with the cherubim around it and all these angelic beings around it and supernatural beings around it, and it represents the prayers of saints. You know what is real important to God? Your prayers. That goes on His golden altar. That ought to put us under conviction. A few years ago, I got under conviction about the weakness of my prayer life. That is a big thing to God. The prayers of the saints is the golden altar that's right there in that exalted position. Now, the one with all the blood all over it and everything, okay, that's brass. This is something to the Lord. All right, Revelation chapter 8, verse 5, and the angel, verse 4, I guess. And the smoke of the incense which came with the prayers of the saints ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar and cast it into the earth. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. So when the angel took that thing and threw it down to earth, some bad things start happening. It says there's some voices. I assume they're angry voices if they're followed by storms and an earthquake. So undoubtedly, these prayers, I know what these prayers are now. They're imprecatory prayers. They're prayers for vengeance. They're prayers saying, God, you see how they wrecked lives. You see how they wrecked children's lives. You see how they led people astray, knowing better. You get them and you get them good. And the angel took those prayers and he said, all right, I'm throwing them down on earth just like they're asking for. And here comes voices, and buddy, they're angry voices. And they're followed by storms and earthquakes and all kinds of horrible things. Verse 6, and the 7 angels which had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. Okay, so now we're finally getting the 7 angels with 7 trumpets. Now we're finally actually starting the second account of the tribulation. The seals was the first, the trumpets is the second. Verse 7, the first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth. And the third part of trees was burned up, and all green grass was burned up. Now remember, they started to do this at the beginning of chapter 7, but the Lord said, now hold off, don't do anything until my servants are sealed in their forehead. All right, well now they are. And now those prayers are there. And he said, this is what they're asking for, and I'm going to give it to them, because this is my servants, and I want them to get the vengeance they've been asking for. So here it comes. Now, there's also voices and storms and an earthquake at the second coming, but this is in the early part of the tribulation period. Remember, during the tribulation period, there's not this one bad thing that happens, at the end when the Lord comes back. No, it's a whole period of bad things happening. There's not one hailstorm. There's bunches of them. There's not one earthquake. There's bunches of them. There's not one lightning. There's bunches of them. Now, there's one real major one there right at the end with the real big earthquake that has the heavens and earth both shaking, and the fish of the sea dying, and the fowls of the heaven falling. Now, what kind of an earthquake makes a bird fall out of the air? The Bible talks about the foundations of heaven are shaking. So that's the real big one at the end, but I assure you, that is not the only one. The tribulation period is not a real good time for 7 years, and then at the end there's this real bad thing. No, the whole thing is no good. You don't want to be here for any of it. So here at the beginning of the tribulation, we've already got some things going on, don't we? All right, let's see, verse 7, what happens? Hail and fire mingled with blood cast on the earth, and the third part of trees was burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. Now, if you woke up in the morning and there had been this terrible hailstorm and fire with it and blood with it, and that was all over your yard, and all the trees were gone and all the grass was burned up, would you notice a difference? I mean, look out on the ground and everything burned up and blood everywhere. Let me tell you something, man. That's going to be a scary time. You're going to go, what has happened here? Verse 8, and the second angel sounded, and as it were a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and the third part of the sea became blood. Good night. 100 years ago, preachers said the world was coming to an end, and the scientists laughed at them. Now, The scientists say the world is coming to an end, and the preachers are laughing at them. What a messed up thing. Oh, don't worry, our God is loving. He's not going to destroy us. Oh, buddy, you better go back and read some Bible. He sure is. How interesting. How things change. Verse 8, here comes this great mountain burning with fire, and the third of the sea is turned to blood. Look at Jeremiah 51, or I will read it to you. What am I wanting here? I think it's verse 5. Nope, 25. Behold, I am against thee, O destroying mountain, saith the Lord, which destroyest all the earth, and I will stretch out mine hand upon thee, and roll thee down from the rocks, and will make thee a burnt mountain. So from time to time, the Lord decides He's going to destroy the earth through the mountain, and then seemingly gets mad at the mountain. Remember when He lifted up Nebuchadnezzar and then said, all right, I'm going to show my power in you. Remember when He lifted up Pharaoh to get done what he wanted and then showed His power in Pharaoh. So God can lift up somebody and get them all strutting around like a peacock and then knock them down. And He does that to this mountain. All right, verse 9, and the third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and the third part of the ships were destroyed. Now that's interesting. So a third of the sea turns to blood, it kills a third of the animals, and it destroys a third of the ships. Can you imagine going down in the sea and it's blood instead of water? Good night. Can you imagine how that smells? Can you imagine the mess and destruction that causes? Now, of course, you recognize water turning to blood from the plagues back in Exodus. Look at Exodus chapter 7. Exodus chapter 7, verse 20, and Moses and Aaron did so as the Lord commanded, and he lifted up the rod and smote the waters that were in the river in the side of Pharaoh and in the side of his servants, and all the waters that were in the river were turned to blood. And the fish that was in the river died, and the river stank, and the Egyptians could not drink of the water of the river, and there was blood throughout all the land of Egypt. I mean, that'd get your attention. What would you do if you got up in the morning and take your shower and turned on the water to make some coffee, and out came blood? Would you notice a difference? I'm pretty sure you'd say, okay, we're not in Kansas anymore. You'd say, wait a minute, this is horrible. You don't want to be here for the tribulation period. Not one day of it. It's horrible. I can't even, there's no way I could remember to tell you everything that's going to be going on when these things happen. And a third part of the ships are destroyed. Look at Daniel. There's a lot of ships out there. You destroy a third of the ships, that's going to kill a bunch of people right there. Let's see, Daniel chapter 11, verse 36. Let's read verse 35 to get our minds in the context here. And some of them of understanding shall fall, to try them and to purge and to make them white. We've been reading about somebody that made the robes white, right? To make them white even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed. And the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god. Well, that's the Antichrist. And shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, for that is determined shall be done. Now look down at verse 40. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. So during this time when there's people with all these ships and feeling real strong, God chose, well, let's see who's really in control. I'll just turn a third of the sea to blood, and then down your ships go. All right, verse 45. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. There's that anticlimactic end that that always happens to people that exalt themselves against God. It looks like they're just getting greater and richer and more powerful, and there's no stopping them. And, oh, we were all jealous, and if we could just be like them, and all the men want to be like him, and all the women want him, and he's so great and bigger, and then he's just gone. With almost no effort, just almost like brushing a bug off the side of the desk. He's just gone. Listen, there is no contest with God. It is not even close. We just had football season start. There were some football games where the people lost 59-7. I mean, it was just no contest. Let me tell you something. With God, it is no contest. I don't care if you're the biggest, strongest, most powerful world leader with the most power and the most worshiping followers and the most money and everything. When you go head to head with God, he might let you grow like he did Pharaoh. But then he just takes you down. You just drown in the water. Just like a pitiful little person that can't even raise up. There is just no contest at all. But there's a bunch of ships there. All right, one more. See, just before Daniel, look at Ezekiel. Ezekiel 38. Ezekiel 38, verse 15. Ezekiel 38, verse 15, to get our minds in the context here. Thou shalt come from thy place out of the north parts, thou and many people with thee, all of them riding upon horses, a great company and a mighty army. And thou shalt come up against my people of Israel as a cloud to cover the land. It shall be in the latter days, and I will bring thee against my land, that the heathen may know me, when I shall be sanctified in thee, O God, before their eyes. Now look down at verse 18. And it shall come to pass at the same time, when God shall come against the land of Israel, saith the Lord God, that my fury shall come up in my face. For in my jealousy and in the fire of my wrath have I spoken. Surely in that day there shall be a great shaking in the land of Israel, so that the fishes of the sea, and the fowls of heaven, and the beasts of the field, and all creeping things that creep upon the earth, and all the men that are upon the face of the earth, shall shake at my presence, and the mountains shall be thrown down, and the steep places shall fall, and every wall shall fall to the ground. And I will call for a sword against him through all my mountains, saith the Lord God. There's that mountain. Mountains. Every man's sword shall be against his brother, and I will plead against him with pestilence and with blood, and I will rain upon him, and upon his bands, and upon the many people that are with him, an overflowing rain, and great hailstones, fire and brimstone. All right, so this is the big one. This is the big earthquake and all these sorts of things that happen. But we're back in Revelation chapter 8. We're still in a fairly early part of the tribulation period, and there's already cases where there's hail coming. There's already water starting to be turned to blood. So there's more than one hailstorm. This one, the way you know this is a different one is what? Look at verse 7. What does this hail destroy? A third part of the trees burn up, and all the green grass was burned up. When the real bad one comes toward the end, who does it get? Does it get the trees? No, it gets the people. It starts out with the trees, and don't get me wrong, that's no fun. It's no fun when you turn on the water and out comes blood. But that's different than when the hail starts hitting you in the head. That's a different matter. All right, back to Revelation chapter 8. Let's see. Revelation chapter 8, we won't take time to look over at the cross-references in Revelation 11 and Revelation 16 that talks about the other hailstorm that destroys men. But it talks about it in 11:19, it talks about it in 16:21, it talks about it there in Ezekiel chapter 38. There's a real hailstorm that comes and wipes out people. But this is an earlier one that wipes out the plants. No mention of men yet at this point. But don't worry, it's coming. Verse 9, and the third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and the third part of the ships were destroyed. Verse 10, and the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called capital W. This one's got a proper name. Wormwood, and the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. So a third part of the sea comes to blood, and now comes wormwood down here, whoever he is, and makes a third part of the waters too bitter for you to even be able to drink. So still, it hasn't exactly directly hit men yet, but they are definitely being affected, aren't they? They're not saying, oh great, it's not hitting me, I'm okay. No, they're in trouble. They're wondering, what in the world am I going to do? Wormwood, and with that capital W showing you it's a proper name. Let's see what we got about wormwood here in the Bible. I'm going to read to you from Jeremiah chapter 9 and verse 15. It's a real bitter herb. Doesn't taste good. And what is happening on the earth, it will not taste good. The old figurative saying is it'll leave a bad taste in your mouth. Jeremiah 9:15, therefore thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, behold, I will feed them, even this people, with wormwood, and give them water to drink. And he says, I'll scatter them among the heathen, and so on. So made bitter, made bitter. Well, in the context, we have the waters turned to blood, and here the water is made bitter. And with the cross-reference back to Exodus chapter 7, when Moses did the plagues the first time, the waters were all turned to blood, and the people were digging around them, trying to find them some decent water to drink. And lo and behold, we know that it ain't just the waters in the sea, but it's the people's drinking water that happens in the tribulation. And the way we know that is from chapter 16 here in Revelation. Revelation chapter 16 verse 4, and the third angel poured out his vial upon the rivers and fountains of waters, and they became blood. And I heard the angel of the waters say, Thou art righteous, O Lord, which art and wast and shalt be, because thou hast judged us. For they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and thou hast given them blood to drink, for they are worthy. Right, and you notice that vengeance thing, where they've been praying for revenge. God sends the prayers down, and what do they get? Blood to drink. And he says in chapter 16, the reason they get blood to drink is because they shed the blood of prophets. And the Lord said, okay, I'll give them some vengeance. So the Lord verifies that that's the reasoning for it. All right, back to Revelation chapter 8 now. Revelation chapter 8, verse 11, and the name of the star is called Wormwood, and the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters, because they were made bitter. Verse 12, and the fourth angel sounded. You know, by this time, you don't want to hear any more angels sounding. And the fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars, so as the third part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. Another likeness to Moses' plagues. Remember, he made it dark in those plagues back in Exodus. And there are signs in the heaven. Like in chapter 6, verse 12 and 13, that last sign in the heaven is the Son of God showing up, and they're scared to death, begging the mountains to fall on them. That's the last one, but it isn't the only one. There will be all kind of weird things happening. Water will be turned to blood. Weird things will be going on in the sky that nobody knows what in the world is happening. Here will come hail mingled with fire and blood, burn up all the grass. There will be all kinds of crazy things happening. So there will be signs in the heaven. The sun all of a sudden dark for a third of the time. You remember when that eclipse came through here a few years ago? I will never forget the weird feeling that hit me. When that eclipse happened, number one, it got colder all of a sudden for a few seconds, a few minutes. And then on top of that, the crickets started chirping and doing whatever they do. That was the weirdest thing I had ever experienced. What if for a third of the day that stuff is going on? You're going to know this is not a normal day. All kinds of strange things and signs up in the heaven. All right, verse 13, and I beheld and heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the three angels, which are yet to sound. Sam Jones, the old Southern Methodist evangelist, used to say, when God says, woe, you better stop. That's a little different use of the word woe, I think, but that's what Sam Jones used to say. So here there are already a bunch of people dead from all these things, and they're saying, woe to the other things that are fixing to come. Can you imagine? I mean, here these people are. All right, the hail with fire and blood has happened, and there's blood all over the ground, and the grass is burned up, and the trees are gone, and all we've got to drink is blood. and wash our clothes and our bodies in his blood, and the sun isn't shining a third of the day, and the moon and stars don't shine other than a third of the time, and you're telling me there's more? Well, good, because other than those few things, we're fine. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. All right, Revelation chapter 9, verse 1. And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. Now, how do you give a star a key? Obviously, this isn't a normal star. So, here's the guy that has the person that has the key, that's the person that is in charge of the building.
Amen.
Do you give the key to just anybody? Do we take our church keys and just go out here on the street corner and hand them out? No, the people that have the church key is the people we trust to open and close these doors. Or at the store where I work, there's only a few of us has a key to that store. My house, there ain't but a few people has a key to my house. Now here this guy has the key to the bottomless pit. It must be his place. Some stars in the Bible are angels. I know a lady that is a good Bible believer and real sincere. But whenever you say something like that, she says, nope. If it's a star, it's a star. If it's an angel, if it's an angel. God's not the author of confusion. Well, sometimes they can have more than one name. All right, look at Job. Look at Job 38. Job 38, as you know, is written in Hebrew poetry. And the poem of Job 38:7 says, when the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. It says it in two different ways. Morning stars and sons of God. Morning stars sing. So those stars are really angels, no doubt about it. And here an angel sounds, and a star falls from heaven, and you give to him the key of the bottomless pit. Well, okay, so it's an angel. Probably not a good angel, though. There are good ones and there are bad ones. All right, verse 2, and he opened the bottomless pit. Of Revelation 9, verse 2, and he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit as the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. All right, now we got that. We've all seen that happen. When a big volcano erupts, guess what happens? Out comes this ash and stuff, and it darkens the sky sometimes for a whole continent, over a whole continent for a while. When Mount St. Helens erupted in 1980, it messed up the sky way all over America for a pretty long period of time. And there was evidence of that for a long time. So he opens the pit. So this is remarkably like a volcano. So when you open that bottomless pit and out comes all this smoke and all this ash and all these things, it's a lot like a volcano erupting. What does that tell you about where this bottomless pit is? All right, verse 3. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. Another likeness to Moses' plagues. It's a bunch of locusts coming out. But in Moses' plague, they just went and destroyed the plants, the crops. These locusts are a little different. The first angels in chapter 8, now they destroyed the earth, but it says back in chapter 8 and verse 13, woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because of these other plagues that are happening. These ain't after the plants. They're after you if you're down here. They'll go right by a tree and sting you. Now it's getting a whole lot more direct. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't no fun to have to drink blood. But it wasn't no fun to go out there and not have any crops. But now it's way more direct. All right, unusual locusts. They're not stifled by smoke, and they have the power of scorpions. Most locusts, they just eat plants. These have a stinger in their tail to come and sting people. Verse 4, and it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, well, a lot of it's burned up anyway, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. So there that comes up again. They directly hurt men, not plants, but not a one of them that's got the seal of God in their foreheads. All right, verse 5. And to them it was given that they should not kill them, but that they should be tormented 5 months. And their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he striketh a man. So the Lord goes and says, all right, now don't kill them, just make them miserable. Sometimes it would be better if you just died. And notice how specific the Bible is. I mean, it says, now these scorpions are come and they're going to make you miserable for 5 months. Why 5 months? Isn't that interesting? The Bible is real specific. It's not like man trying to predict something that doesn't really know. The God of eternity knows the exact details of what's going to happen on this earth, exactly what is going to happen, exactly how long it's going to last. All right, and the torment is the torment of a scorpion when he striketh a man. Now, thank God I've never felt that. I've been stung by some insects and stuff, but never a scorpion. But I bet it's not fun. Verse 6, and in those days shall men seek death, and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. So these 5 months are so bad, you wish you could die. So that angel in chapter 8, verse 13 was not just kidding around when he said, woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth. I mean, you've had a little animal that scared you pretty good in your house, maybe found a snake or something, and you either ran away or killed the thing or something, and it lasted, what, a few minutes? What if you had an animal after you and you couldn't get rid of it for 5 months? How pleasant would that be? I've seen people, a mouse ran across the floor and they were up on a chair screaming over a mouse. How about if it's a locust that stings you like a scorpion and it stays and you keep running from it for 5 months? And there's bunches of them. I mean, you do not want to be here for 1 day of the tribulation period, and certainly not for these 5 months. Verse 7, and the shapes of the locusts, okay, let's get more specific. And the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses prepared unto battle. Okay, that's not what locusts look like. And on their heads were as it were crowns like gold, and their faces were as the faces of men. Okay, this is totally different. I don't know if they're the size of locusts. I don't know if they're the size of horses. I can't picture it. I'm scared to speculate, but I don't want them after me for 5 months of my life, for sure. Not even 5 seconds of my life. Verse 8, and they had hair as the hair of women. Oh, so this is from the long-haired people. And their teeth were as the teeth of lions. And they had breastplates, as it were, breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings, okay, so they do have wings like locusts, whereas the sound of chariots of many horses running to battle. Maybe they're a good bit bigger than locusts. This armor, prepared unto battle, makes some people say that they represent modern or futuristic military machines like tanks or something. But I tend to take my Bible more literally unless it tells me that it's a type of something, and it doesn't seem to tell you that it's a type of anything. Others say planes or rockets. I think they just literally got stings in their tails like a scorpion. Verse 10, and they had tails like unto scorpions, and there were stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men 5 months. I mean, look how specific he's being. He mentions the 5 months in verse 5 and again in verse 10. Verse 11, and they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon. I told you that was an angel. Sure enough, it's the angel of the bottomless pit. Who in the world would have the key to the bottomless pit but the angel in charge of the bottomless pit? And his name in the Hebrew is Abaddon, or in the Greek is Apollyon. That means to destruction. Another good word that means the same thing is perdition. And the Antichrist is called the son of perdition. So this guy is the king over these locusts. But wait a minute. We've got a verse in the Bible that contradicts that. Look at Proverbs chapter 30. Proverbs chapter 30, talking about locusts. Proverbs 30, verse 27. The locusts have no king, yet go they forth all of them by bands. Well, these locusts do. The locusts that look like horses and wear armor and have faces like men and hair like women and teeth like lions, those kind of locusts have a king. And his name is destruction or perdition. And the name of the Antichrist is the son of perdition. So it's a devil who is called a king. One more, I'll turn to Job 41 and read to you. We have another supernatural guy that is said to be a king. What verse am I wanting here? Job chapter 41 is the description of Leviathan, that great dragon. And it says in verse 33, Upon earth there is not his like, who is made without fear. He beholdeth all high things. He is a king over all the children of pride. So that dragon, that Leviathan, that devil, he is a king. And these locusts have a king over them. All right, back to Revelation 9. Revelation chapter 9, let's see. Charles Manson. You remember Charles Manson and Helter Skelter and that crazy bunch of drugged up hippies that murdered those people. He said this was him. Absolutely lost his mind. But he does come up in Revelation chapter 17. Look at Revelation chapter 17, verse 8. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. Oh, there he is in his place. And go into perdition. Remember, his name is the son of perdition or destruction, meaning the words Abaddon or Apollyon. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not, and yet is. So he was a guy that was here and then wasn't here in the book at the time of the writing of the book of Revelation, and yet is still alive somewhere, and he's connected to the bottomless pit. Who in the world would that be? Who in the world goes down there to hell and it's his place? Acts chapter 1. There is a guy in the Bible that goes to hell, and they call it his place. He owns the place. He has the key to it. Acts 1:25. Well, let's get verse 24 to get the sentence. And they prayed and said, Thou, Lord, which knowest the hearts of all men, show whether of these two thou hast chosen, that he may take part of this ministry and apostleship, from which Judas by transgression fell, that he might go to his own place. So Judas is the one guy that when he dies and goes to hell, goes to his own place, that he's given the key to. Goodness gracious. You say, well, no, Judas was just a human. John chapter 6, Have not I chosen you 12, and one of you is a devil? Not one of you is possessed of a devil, but one of you is a devil. John chapter 17, Jesus is praying, and he says, Those that thou hast given me, I have kept, and none of them is lost, except the son of perdition. Same meaning as destruction. Abaddon and Apollyon. So we know who this guy is. All right, Revelation chapter 9, verse 12. One woe is past, and behold, there come two woes more hereafter. So now these people's plants are all gone, water is blood, sun, moon, and stars only shining a third of the time. For 5 months, they're running from locusts that are like scorpions, and the angels say, all right, you got 2 more coming. No, you don't want to be here for 1 day of the tribulation period. You don't want any of your loved ones here for 1 day of the tribulation period. In the meantime, if they don't take the mark of the beast, they can't buy or sell. If they do take the mark of the beast, they're damned. It is a mess. It is a horrible thing. All right, we better stop there. We'll pick up next time. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this study. God, I pray that you'd help us to just take your Bible literally and believe it for what it says.